All right, bows and bow ties, I'm back. I just did a video on bridging the gap. What did I call it? Why younger women need mentorship from seasoned sisters. And now I want to do another live on what did I call it? Melanin and Mindsets. So the perspective on why we struggle with sisterhood, why Black women in particular struggle with sisterhood. Okay, so my last live I talked about sisterhood. I'll bring it back up again. First, let's operate from the same standpoint here. Sisterhood is basically a bond shared between women. It's a shared community and a shared experience. Some other things I have is being in solidarity with one another. So I like to highlight from the Black woman's perspective because I am a Black woman, and I think we need to have a level of specificity, right? So the last slide was on the fact that we need it. It's important. We need to bridge the gap, basically generational gap. And now I just want to talk about why we struggle so much. And these two conversations, the one I just did and the one I'm doing now, they are similar but not the same. Okay, so again, sisterhood is a shared bond between people of the same community, shared experiences, that type of thing. Okay, so one of the things I'm going to talk about, which is going to be a little bit uncomfortable primarily for me, is I think one of the main reasons why we struggle with sisterhood, and I'm going to start off with colorism. Now, I typically don't like having conversations about colorism unless they're productive, right? I like for them to lead towards something, to accomplish something. I don't want to be in a situation where it's constantly like, you hurt me, like everybody is hurt. But I want to talk about the divisiveness due to colorism, which is one of the reasons. I think that it makes it really difficult for us to be in solidarity with one another because there is this elephant that is in the room. By the way, if you hear noise to my left, your right, where's my hand? Over here. There we go. My son is sitting next to me eating a candy cane loudly. He knows he can't be on camera. So I said, okay, well then you're stuck there. You can go behind this computer. You can go over to my left, but you can't get up and go downstairs. My basement's that way. And I'm like, you can go upstairs. Anyway, so I want to talk about colorism for a second. We have this elephant that's in the room. I think most of us who are Black, we are aware of colorism, the preferential treatment, that sort of thing. So I'm going to use myself because there's nothing like using firsthand experience. I want you guys to listen to me for a second. I did not experience colorism, right? But I benefited from colorism back in my theater fine days. Now, let me just say this. It's not comfortable to have these conversations, but they need to be said. When I was younger, you may have heard this in a video maybe a year or two ago. When I was younger, I wasn't aware too much of colorism. I was aware of racism. Colorism, vaguely familiar with, but I couldn't name it. I actually didn't really become aware of much until I went to college, right? I had many people. There was this one guy in particular, he used to say, "What's up, Red?" And I didn't even know what that meant. But long story short, I experienced some negative things from those who experienced colorism and took it out on me. But what I want to do is I want to talk about me benefiting from colorism for a second. I wasn't really, I feel like I'm all over the place. My apologies. I wasn't really aware of it until I got to college, and I couldn't name it. I don't know if that makes any sense. I didn't know how to name it. But what I will say was I was referenced a lot based off of what my skin tone was. And as I got older, people wanted to call it out a lot. And it's not like I've never heard of it when I was younger, but it wasn't really a thing too much when I was younger. I don't think my family focused too much on that type of thing. But when I got older and as I started to learn what this thing was, right? I couldn't name it. I didn't know it was called colorism, but I knew as I got older, it took a while that I was benefiting from it. In the beginning, I did nothing. Now, I want you to let that one sink in for a second. I did nothing back in my fair, finer, younger days. So now it's like I didn't know how to name it at first, but I knew I was benefiting from it. And there was in my opinion, I think a little lack of maturity on it. There was some ignorance. But I will say this, as I got older, I gotta give myself a pat on the back. As I got older and I started to understand, what does colonialization look like and the shades of blackness and all these other things, I had become uncomfortable. But let me say this, I still just get up. You're not on camera. Go. I will say this, I still did nothing. I want you to understand. So I actually was a participant in, I'm just going to call it bad behavior, right? Because I didn't do anything at first. I didn't do anything. I benefited from it. I couldn't name it, but I knew this thing existed. And as I became aware, I still didn't do anything, but I was uncomfortable. Now, this is not easy to have these conversations, okay? It's not easy to have these conversations. And it wasn't something that I walked out and was like, hey, look at me. But I knew people preferred me back at that time. And it's not just on a dating aspect. I want to be clear. This was from a professional standpoint. This was in almost every aspect. Now, this is the thing. As I became aware and more conscious, and I would say convicted, right? I began to slowly speak up on it, right? And it was uncomfortable because when I would call it out, people were more like, well, why do you care so much? You're lucky that you know, X, Y, and Z. I'm trying to be gentle around here because I don't like when my kids are around. It's just, they need to know about colors and stuff, but because they don't really think about it too much, I don't want to put these bad thoughts in their minds. But my thing was, when I became aware and I did nothing at first, I was starting to be convicted of, this is not cool. And then I had to make some changes, right? And that's when I started understanding privilege. Now, this is before today, when people started calling it, having privilege and preferences and stuff like that. I would actually start calling it out. And it was really uncomfortable because I knew that I had benefited from it. So it's almost like you're cutting off, it's like to spite your face, right? You're cutting off your in. I saw how people were affected by colorism, namely women. And to sit there and to fight on the behalf of other women that didn't like me, let me tell you something, it's a very hard thing to do. Even when you know that they don't like you, and I don't want to divulge the information because there may be people watching this and they'll realize, oh, this is what you're talking about. But there were people who I defended because colorism was, I just think is really messed up, right? And I would try to defend on their behalf and put in the work and do the right things, even though I knew they didn't like me simply because I existed. All right. What I'm saying is I had preferential treatment that in the beginning I did nothing to stop, right? Because I was preferred. But as I got older, right, I tried to call it out, make some changes, all these good things. But when a group of people are given a set of, when they have preferential treatment, they're treated a certain way, they get opportunities, I had opportunities. And let me tell you, I know I had opportunities because I've had people who did not look like me say, like, you know, you're easier to talk to. I've had darker skinned men say things like, you're not as angry as the dark skinned women, all kinds of stupid, ignorant things. Child, I can tell you stories. What I'm saying is, I can see why that can be one reason, a reason for there to be divisiveness among Black women. So if we want to have conversations, we have to be honest, even when they're not comfortable. I know that people are going to want to shoot salvos off at me for calling a thing, but you have to be willing to be vulnerable, and you have to be honest. So I know I had preferential treatment. I know I had it. I know. I have all kinds of stories. With that being said, I can see why it's really hard for Black women to have sisterhood when you have colorism looming right there, in the real conversations aren't being had. We will say things like, it shouldn't happen, which I do believe most people believe that, but people don't want to give up their privileges. And I remember when I had these conversations with people, it was hard for me knowing that there was a group of women. I know for a fact 100% there were a group of women who targeted me, who came for me hard and made up lies and everything. And I'm sitting here on the back end, on the other side, trying to do the right thing. And it is really difficult, especially when you're convicted, to make a difference and to use whatever power or platform or whatever it is you have. I don't care if it's minuscule, to benefit other people. It's really, really hard. Okay, I'll just leave it there without divulging information. But when we don't have these honest conversations, or people who are white passing, they're brighter than me or whatever it is, if they're not being honest and saying, yeah, you know what, I was a participant, or I benefited, whatever like that, it makes it hard to bridge these gaps, right? You can't have a good, so now I'm not saying every Black relationship is like that. I have Black relationships with people who are darker than me, lighter than me, whatever it is. What I'm saying is, en masse, collectively, there is this thing that's sitting right there, this elephant in the room, and we don't have real conversations. We don't have productive conversations. It's more on the lines of, they don't care about us. There's a reason why you have channels out here, and I'm going to call them out. You have the I think the Chrissy channel, the I Am Eloho channel. I like to listen to different channels. It's feast or famine for me. You have the Exoticals United. That's the one for the light skin mixed ladies or whatever it is. So I'll like listen to them for a period of time, then I'll unsubscribe because I can only take it in doses. And then it's like a round robin. You have all these different channels. There's a reason why they exist. But when you're dealing with colorism, right? You got these different sides talking about how they've been negatively impacted by it, right? So I did not experience colorism, but I have been impacted by how other people have been treated, which in turn is how there has been some very nasty and divisive things that have happened. But like I said, when you've got a group of people who have been denied opportunities, who have been denied resources, all these other things. Now, you'll have light-skinned people who will, or mixed people, or whatever it is, that'll deny that, and they'll think a lot of things. And you'll also have the other side of the coin who say a lot of things full of vitriol and hate too. But I do think it is this nasty thing that's sitting right there that nobody wants to be honest about and talk about. And for those who look like me, who are brighter than me, or mixter, or whatever you want to call it, they don't want to be honest and talk about their participation. Like, I don't feel bad waking up the way that I was born, and you shouldn't, but you can look at how you have been a participant and how you want to show up in this world and maybe try to fix things. And look, and I don't have all the answers, and I'm not saying this eloquently, but I think when you have something like that looming, for those who have been impacted by colorism, it makes it hard for there to be like a really good sisterhood. Now, not every relationship is like that. There are some really healthy relationships out there where people aren't caught up. But I know it still exists out there because the conversations are sitting out here. All right. So anyway, this is the why. The last live was about, hey, this is like, what is sisterhood, why it's important. Now I want to talk about why it's so hard for Black women to have, or to why we're struggling with this sisterhood. And colorism is just one of them. There are people who are affected by it, and a lot of people don't want to get honest. A lot of people don't want to say, you know what? You're right. I was a participant. I still am a participant. You know what I mean? There are people who still, or you can unconsciously not know I can't get the words. You can unconsciously not know there might be things that or subconsciously, not unconsciously, subconsciously, you may be still participating. I could have a blind spot. What I do know is when I gained a level of maturity and everything like that, and I started having these really hard conversations and calling out things, and it wasn't easy, right? When you're like, well, why would you say or do these things, whatever, depending on the scenario. It was really hard because to sit there and say, it's not so much that I want to denigrate myself, but when you're calling out, I'm just going to say from an aesthetic standpoint, a beauty standpoint, I'm like, this woman is not an ugly woman. And they don't have to be a beauty queen, but because somebody is not looking like Meghan Markle, does that make them not feminine, not attractive, not any of these things? So it became a really interesting thing to sit there and try to defend a group of people who are still angry. Like I said, I knew some that were, but when you're trying to do the right things, it's hard. But you have to, like I said, you just have to be willing to call it out and to say, hey, look, there's a reason why people are disappointed and angry and hurt. They're opportunities. Let's just talk about opportunities. Let's talk about visibility. Anyway, I'm going to move on to something else. I think that this conversation can go much deeper. I think that in order to have these conversations, though, in my opinion, it would be better served when you have darker skinned women and lighter skinned women in the same spaces. I don't like having these kinds of conversations and not everyone is represented, right? Because then I'm just doing it in a vacuum. So that's why I say I typically don't like to have conversations on colorism. I'm going to move on to something else. Another reason why I think it's really hard for Black women to have sisterhood is because we don't have enough safe spaces. I'm finding that even when I would try to have vulnerable conversations with Black women, now this is just my experience. This is going to sound really messed up. They did not allow for that level of vulnerability. I had found that when I was having conversations with people who didn't look like me, they were more open, which was bizarre because, I'm a little guarded when it comes to people who don't look like me, right? I'm like, I don't know. But they were more open. They were more vulnerable. But I find that with a lot of Black women, we're so busy being so hard and protective because we've been so hurt. And I understand where that's coming from, that we can't be vulnerable. We can't have these safe spaces with each other. We can't show this other side other than this toughness, right? We can't show the side that maybe cries, or the side that says, I don't think I can do this. The side that's not confident, I can't do this today. Like, I'm not feeling it. We don't allow space for that. So again, the first point I made was the colorism thing and in the participation, my participation in it. But then there's not enough of the safe spaces, the spaces where you can show that vulnerability and somebody provides a level of empathy back, where you can be honest, where you can engage in self-discovery and exploration, and people say, okay, maybe I don't understand it, but let's go with it. You know what I mean? I think that's why we struggle with that sisterhood. I'm talking about collectively, and if this doesn't apply to you, then don't sign up for it. Don't take it personal, okay? I'm seeing that. I have experienced that. Yes, I have relationships with Black women, but I have relationships with white women too. I just think that in many of these spaces, it's almost as if we can't allow for ourselves to be insecure, emotionally insecure with each other. But I could be wrong. If you have a difference in opinion, just let me know. Let me go on to the next one. I think a lot of it has to do with the scarcity of resources, right? We struggle with our sisterhood because we're too busy trying to, I think, elevate at this point in time. We have a fractured community. So right now, it's almost as if even when we say we're not pick me's, I feel like collectively it's like a one big pick me generation, or era, not generation era, whereas we're all trying to be seen as the most talented, the most beautiful, the most it girl, the most everything, right? And first we have to elevate within the community before we can be even seen outside the community, right? Because there's very few opportunities. Well, the perception is the opportunities are scarce. So in order to get one of those coveted opportunities, we have to elevate ourselves within this community, right? So I think instead of creating these strong bonds with each other, it's more like we have fostered competition among each other. And let me just say for the record, competition is good. Iron sharpens iron, right? Competition is good. But I think that there's an imbalance in terms of the competition versus maybe the love, the grace, the empathy, the nurture, right? I think we struggle just because we are dealing with this scarcity mindset, the colorism, what was the other thing? Not enough safe spaces. Okay. Um, I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Look, if you think that I've got it wrong, this is a good time to leave a comment. And subscribe. Subscribe. But these are just some of the things. I think I wrote down a couple more. I did. I think we have a climate of mistrust. And like I said, if this doesn't apply to you and your relationships, please don't get caught up. I'm just talking about what I've observed in some of my experiences. It's not the sum total of my experiences, but these are my experiences and some of the things that I've heard from people over my lifetime. I'm 47. So I think there is a climate of mistrust. We've constantly been pitted against each other between our own men and outside of the community, right? No one trusts anyone. No one. I've definitely have lost trust with some women because of and it could just be women in general, but being that, you know, a lot of my relationships were with Black women, well, you tend to attach it to Black women, right? What I'm saying is there was a climate of mistrust for a period of time when you find that, you know, you try to dedicate your cycles to people. Now, these are some of this is in the past. I'm not saying all of these things are today. All right. But what happens is you can't have that closeness, that bond with each other if you're going to abuse the trust between one another. And you see it on reality TV too. Like as soon as one thing happens and they go run and tell the whole group and it becomes national news. And like, this is why I had to stop watching it, right? Because that's not sisterhood. Here you have this experience on television, and you could take that opportunity to highlight key things that affect Black women or to highlight really fun experiences or whatever. But instead, they choose to use that platform to hurt each other, to harm each other. They want to shade each other, they want to read each other, then they want to drag each other. So you can't have a strong sisterhood when you have an environment of mistrust among each other. And these are just my thoughts. I could be wrong. And then I'll say the last thing has to do with the stereotypes and visibility, which was closely related to another point. But I think the biggest thing, what did I write down? I think, like I said, we want to be seen and we're breeding this competition. And like I said, competition is still good. You want competition. Iron sharpens iron. but because, like I said, we are competing for visibility and adoration and adulation, all those things, you can't, it's like, if the opportunities are limited and you have this competition, it's going to be really hard to foster the good relations or good relationships when the opportunities aren't plentiful. Even though it's a perception, there's more opportunity than we think, right? But perception may be like, I got to fight to get this, whether it's a man, whether it's a job, whether it's, I don't know, a material good. I don't know. So the stereotype of who we are and what we want to be and how visible we are. So now we're competing for that. Now we're competing to prove how feminine we are. And the way we're doing it isn't, everybody looks the same. I'm telling you, everybody's got the same wig, the same BBL, the same eyebrows, the same uh, fingernails. We got the same boobs. We got the same lips. We got the same everything. We have the same everything. I have like candy cane stuck to my toe. I'm trying to figure out, how did this get stuck to my toe? We just had our house cleaned yesterday. Anyway, I think ultimately where I'm trying to go with this was, we have these barriers within our community right now because we are so fractured and we're so hurt and we're so burdened. We got the stereotype of us being all these things, right? I feel like I have something stuck to me. It was like a piece of candy cane. My kids are trying me. So we've got this whole, I think, let me back up. Where I'm going with this was, in order for us to have a sisterhood, there's certain things that are within the sisterhood that needs to be, or within the community, that have to be addressed. And I think those barriers are, I don't know if they're big barriers, but they are there. The roadblocks are there. And right now, it seems like we're hyper focused on certain things and we can't build these healthy relationships because, for one, individually, we are broken, right? Individually, we have shenanigans going on with ourselves. And so because we're not right, and then you've got these things that are within the community itself, we can't have these healthy relationships. We can't. So anyway, that's pretty much it. Those were my few little notes. I wrote a note on here that a lot of this stems from our history, society, and some personal reasons. I'll say that. That makes good sense. But anyway, that's pretty much it. I'm gonna go ahead and just like end this now. This is a good place to end. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Let me know what your thoughts are. I'm really interested. I definitely would love to have a conversation about colorism again. But the thing that has to happen is there has to be more than just myself participating in that conversation. And there needs to be true representation. You can't just have someone who looks like Zendaya and you don't have someone who looks like Lupita Nyong'o in the conversation. Now, I know I chose two extremes, but I think you understand the point I'm trying to make. And you don't want a conversation that's simply based off of like, well, it was always these types of girls that did this, that, and the other, and somebody pulled my hair, and somebody did this. Like, there's no productive. I don't know what's productive about that other than being honest about your participation in it, being honest in your experiences with it, and then what you would like to see moving forward. There has to be some sort of resolution. There has to be some sort of plan, right? If you don't have that resolution or plan, we get nowhere. We continue to have these same bad conversations. But anyway, that's pretty much it. I hope you guys enjoyed it. For those of you who just joined on, you're going to have to catch the replay because I need to, it's kind of late in the day and I haven't showered, so I need to take a shower and I got to run my son to his basketball game. All right, go ahead, leave a comment and subscribe because I'm amazing in every way and can do no wrong. Have a good one.